I'm Veronica, 31, and 2 weeks before my wedding, my fiancé abandoned me, taking our savings and leaving me financially ruined. With nowhere to live and creditors calling, I desperately accepted a position as a live-in caretaker for a paralyzed billionaire, despite the ominous warnings about previous nurses quitting. The salary was too good to refuse. But on my very first night in that massive estate, I discovered something that made my blood run cold, something connected to my painful past that I never could have imagined. If you're watching this, let me know where you're tuning in from. Hit subscribe and prepare yourself for a story about betrayal that runs deeper than you could ever imagine. My life before everything fell apart was exactly what I'd worked so hard to achieve. As a registered nurse specializing in rehabilitation care, I had built a solid career that I was immensely proud of, especially considering my humble beginnings in rural Pennsylvania. My grandmother had raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was just 7 years old, and she had always emphasized the importance of standing on my own 2 feet. And I did just that. I worked my way through nursing school, graduating with honors, despite taking on extra shifts to cover my expenses. That's where I met my best friend Mia, who stuck with me through thick and thin. We bonded during those grueling overnight study sessions and celebrated each small victory together. By 30, I thought I had everything figured out. I was engaged to Jackson, a handsome finance guy I'd been with for 5 years. Everyone thought we were the perfect couple. He had the prestigious job at a top investment firm, and I had my fulfilling work at the rehabilitation center. We complemented each other so well, or at least that's what I believed. We had booked a beautiful lakeside venue for our wedding, just 3 hours outside the city. I'd been saving for over 2 years for our honeymoon to Bali, pinching pennies while Jackson assured me his bonus would cover most of our wedding expenses. I had even purchased my wedding dress, an elegant satin gown that cost more than I'd ever spent on any single item in my life. But it was worth it. This was supposed to be the beginning of the stable family I never had growing up. Our downtown apartment wasn't huge, but it was in a good neighborhood with a doorman and a small balcony where I grew herbs in the summer. Jackson and I had mapped out our future together, marriage this year, start trying for children within 2 years, maybe buy a house in the suburbs after that. It all seemed so certain. My friends envied what we had. "You guys are relationship goals," they would say. Even my grandmother, who was initially skeptical of Jackson's smooth charm, had eventually warmed to him. She was looking forward to the wedding, had even bought a new dress for the occasion, her first splurge in years. I had supported Jackson through his MBA program, taking on extra weekend shifts and night duty to help with tuition when his company's education benefits fell short. I didn't mind. That's what partners do, right? They sacrifice for each other, build a life together step by step. My patients at the rehab center often told me I had healing hands. I specialized in helping people recover from traumatic injuries, teaching them to walk again, to feed themselves, to reclaim independence. I found purpose in that work, in being the steady presence guiding them through their darkest times. Little did I know how soon I would need to apply those same skills to my own broken life. Jackson and I had last names that sounded good together. We had a joint bank account. We had a favorite takeout place where they knew our order by heart. We had everything a couple is supposed to have. At least that's what I thought. It was an ordinary Tuesday when my life imploded. I came home early from work because a patient had canceled their therapy session. I was thinking about using the unexpected free time to finalize some wedding details. Maybe I would call the florist about those centerpieces Jackson thought were too expensive. I unlocked our apartment door and called out Jackson's name, surprised that he was home in the middle of the afternoon. The closet door in our bedroom was open, and Jackson was stuffing clothes into a suitcase. "What's going on?" "Are you going somewhere?" I asked, confusion giving way to a slow, creeping dread as I took in the scene. Jackson barely looked up. His face, when he finally turned to me, held none of the warmth I was accustomed to. Instead, his expression was distant, almost cold. "This isn't working, Veronica," he said in a matter-of-fact tone that made my stomach drop. "I'm leaving." I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. "What do you mean leaving?" "We're getting married in 2 weeks. The venue is paid for. My dress is hanging right there." I pointed to the garment bag in the corner of the room. That's when he told me, with an almost clinical detachment, that he had been having an affair with a colleague for the past 6 months. Lauren, from the mergers department, with her family connections and trust fund. "We're just from different worlds, Veronica," he said, as if that explained everything. "Lauren gets my ambitions. She moves in the circles I need to be in to advance my career." Different worlds. I echoed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "We've been together for 5 years. We live in the same apartment. We sleep in the same bed." Jackson zipped his suitcase with a finality that made me flinch. "Let's be real. You were always going to be the girl from nowhere, Pennsylvania, who works too hard for too little. I need someone who elevates my position, not someone I have to explain to the partners at dinner parties." Each word was like a slap. All those times I'd felt slightly out of place at his work functions, the sideways glances from his colleagues when I mentioned my job, the comments about my practical career. It all suddenly took on a different meaning. The humiliation of the following days was almost worse than the shock. I had to cancel the venue, return wedding gifts, and explain to everyone why the wedding was off. Some friends were sympathetic, others clearly had suspected something was wrong all along but hadn't wanted to tell me. Then came the financial blow. When I went to withdraw money to put a deposit on a new apartment, I discovered our joint account had been emptied. Jackson had taken everything, including the money I'd saved for our honeymoon. "He said you agreed to it," the bank teller told me uncomfortably when I demanded an explanation. But that was just the beginning. The calls from creditors started coming a few days later. Credit card debt, a personal loan, even a gambling debt to someone who sounded distinctly threatening on the phone. Jackson had apparently been living beyond his means for quite some time and had put my name on several accounts without my knowledge. My credit score, once impeccably maintained, was in ruins. I couldn't afford the apartment anymore, so Mia let me crash on her couch while I tried to figure out what to do. Her one-bedroom place wasn't meant for 2 people, and though she never complained, I could tell the arrangement was straining our friendship. The most difficult call was to my grandmother. At 78, she had been so excited about the wedding, about seeing me settled and happy. Telling her that Jackson had left, that there would be no wedding, made the situation painfully real. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. Do you need to come home for a while?" But her small house in Pennsylvania was already crowded with my cousin, who had moved in with her 2 kids after her own divorce. There was no room for me there either. I hit rock bottom the day I had to pawn the engagement ring to pay off the most pressing of the debts Jackson had left me with. The jeweler examined it carefully before offering me a fraction of what I knew it was worth. "It's not even a real diamond," he told me gently. "It's a good cubic zirconia, but definitely not what you thought it was." That night, curled up on Mia's couch, with all my possessions reduced to 2 suitcases, I made a vow to myself I would never depend on anyone else again. I would rebuild my life on my own terms. I just needed to find a way forward, some path out of this mess that would let me reclaim my independence and my dignity. "You need to see this," Mia said one evening, thrusting her tablet into my hands as I returned from another dispiriting day of apartment hunting in neighborhoods I couldn't afford. On the screen was a job listing that made me do a double take. Seeking rehabilitation nurse for live-in position, competitive salary, immediate start, housing provided, experience with spinal injuries required. The salary listed made my eyes widen. It was nearly triple what I currently earned at the rehabilitation center. "This has to be a scam," I said, scrolling through the sparse details. "Nobody pays this much for a private nurse." "I checked it out," Mia replied. The listing is through Wellington and Frost, that big law firm downtown. I called them. It's legitimate. Something about it still seemed off. What's the catch? Why is the pay so high? 2 days later, I found myself in the sleek offices of Wellington and Frost, signing a non-disclosure agreement before I could even interview for the position. Mr. Winters, the attorney handling the recruitment, was a thin man with steel-rimmed glasses who rarely blinked. He sat across from me, hands folded on a leather portfolio, studying me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "The position is unique," he said after I'd signed the NDA. "The patient requires round-the-clock specialized care and values his privacy above all else." "Can you tell me more about the patient's condition?" I asked, trying to sound professionally detached. "Mr. Blackwood sustained a spinal cord injury 2 years ago. He has partial paralysis from the waist down and experiences intermittent sensation and movement. He requires physical therapy, medication, management, and assistance with daily activities." The name registered immediately. Alexander Blackwood, the reclusive tech billionaire, whose revolutionary security software had made him a fortune before he turned 30. There had been some scandal about him a few years back, something about his wife, but I couldn't remember the details. "Why me?" I asked. "I'm sure you could hire anyone with my qualifications." Mr. Winters' expression remained impassive. "Your background check was satisfactory. Mr. Blackwood requires someone with no familial obligations who can commit to living on site. Your recent change in circumstances makes you ideally suited." The mention of my recent change in circumstances sent a chill through me. How much did they know about Jackson, about my financial situation? As if reading my thoughts, Mr. Winters continued. "We're very thorough, Ms. Miller. We need to be. The previous 6 nurses hired for this position all quit within weeks." "6?" I echoed. "Why did they leave?" "They found the isolation challenging, or they objected to certain aspects of the position. Mr. Blackwood can be demanding." Warning bells were going off in my head, but so was the reminder of my maxed-out credit cards and the debt collectors who called daily. Mr. Winters slid a thick contract across the desk. "The position requires absolute confidentiality. You will live on the estate and may not leave the grounds for the first month of employment. Certain areas of the house are strictly off-limits. All of this is outlined in the contract." I skimmed the document, noting clauses about security protocols, restricted areas, and penalties for breach of confidentiality that made my head spin. When I got back to Mia's apartment that evening, she was waiting anxiously. "Well, how did it go?" I showed her the contract. "They offered me the job, but I haven't signed yet. The whole thing seems so strange." Mia read through the document, her frown deepening. "This is sketchy as hell, V. No contact with the outside world for a month. Restricted areas. Penalties for taking photographs. It sounds like you're signing up to be a prisoner, not a nurse." "The money, though," I said quietly. "I could pay off all of Jackson's debts in 3 months. Have my own place again in 6. "At what cost?" Mia pressed. "What if this Blackwood guy is dangerous? What if there's a reason 6 other nurses quit?" I thought about it all night, weighing my options. In the morning, bleary-eyed but resolved, I called Mr. Winters and accepted the position. 3 days later, after a barrage of medical exams, security briefings, and another stack of paperwork, I was in a company car heading toward the Blackwood estate, everything I owned packed in the trunk. As we left the city behind, I researched Alexander Blackwood on my phone. The accident that had injured him 2 years ago was shrouded in mystery. The official story was that he had been in a car crash, but there were rumors of foul play. His wife, Elise Blackwood, had reportedly died in the same accident, though some gossip sites questioned this, pointing out the lack of funeral details or death certificates in public records. The Blackwood Technologies website showed a handsome man with intense eyes and a confident smile so different from the reclusive invalid I was going to care for. I wondered what he was like now after 2 years of pain and isolation. As the car turned onto a private road winding through dense forest, I put my phone away and stared out at the wilderness. Whatever awaited me at Blackwood Estate, it had to be better than the shambles my life had become. At least that's what I told myself as the massive iron gates swung open to admit us. I had no way of knowing I was driving straight into a nightmare far worse than the one I was leaving behind. The Blackwood Estate appeared suddenly through the trees like something from another world. A sprawling modern mansion of glass and stone perched on the mountainside, it looked more like a fortress than a home. Geometric angles jutted out from the main structure, and floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the cloudy afternoon sky. The driver, who hadn't spoken more than 2 words the entire 3-hour journey, pulled up to the main entrance and popped the trunk. "Someone will get your bags," he said, his first complete sentence. I stood on the pristine circular driveway, taking in the scale of the place. The grounds extended in every direction, immaculately landscaped near the house, but quickly giving way to dense forest. A high-tech security fence was visible in the distance, running the perimeter as far as I could see. The massive front door opened before I could approach it, revealing a tall, angular woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a severe bun. "Ms. Miller," she said, not a question but a statement. "I am Ms. Harrison, the household manager. You're 20 minutes earlier than expected." I checked my watch. "I'm sorry the traffic was lighter than anticipated. Punctuality is expected, not early, not late." She gestured for me to enter. "I'll show you the areas you need to know." The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. The foyer soared 3 stories high with a floating staircase that seemed to defy gravity. Everything was in shades of white, gray, and black with occasional accents in steel blue. It was beautiful but sterile, more like a high-end museum than a place where someone lived. Ms. Harrison moved briskly through the house, pointing out rooms with barely enough time for me to register them. Main living area rarely used. Kitchen staff serves meals at 7:12 and 6 precisely. Library, Mr. Blackwood's office, strictly off-limits. Media room also rarely used. And the few staff members we passed gave me curious glances, but quickly averted their eyes when Ms. Harrison looked their way. A young man polishing a banister, a middle-aged woman arranging flowers, an elderly gardener visible through a window, they all had the same wary expression. "The medical suite," Ms. Harrison announced, opening double doors to reveal what looked like a private hospital wing. State-of-the-art equipment filled the room, from a physical therapy area to monitoring systems I recognized from my work at the rehabilitation center. "You'll find everything cataloged and maintained according to medical standards," she continued. "Dr. Sharma visits weekly to assess Mr. Blackwood's condition and will be your primary contact for medical matters. The rest of the time, Mr. Blackwood's care falls to you." I nodded, mentally cataloging the equipment. "This is impressive. Better than what we have at my hospital." "Mr. Blackwood demands the best," she replied without emotion. "Now your quarters." We took an elevator to the 2nd floor, where she led me down a long hallway. "The East Wing is strictly off-limits," she said, gesturing to a set of double doors with a keypad lock. "Security reasons. Attempting to enter will result in immediate termination." My room, or rather my suite, was larger than Mia's entire apartment. A sitting area with comfortable furniture, a bedroom with a king-sized bed, a bathroom with a shower, and separate soaking tub, even a small kitchenette, all decorated in the same minimalist style as the rest of the house. "Your belongings will be brought up shortly," Ms. Harrison said. "There are new uniforms in the closet. Mr. Blackwood prefers a clinical appearance." I opened the closet to find several sets of scrubs in a soft gray color, along with casual clothes for my off hours, all in my size. "How did you know my measurements?" I asked. "We're thorough," she replied, the same phrase Mr. Winters had used. It was starting to sound ominous. "Dinner is at 6. You'll meet Mr. Blackwood tomorrow morning at 9. I suggest you familiarize yourself with his medical file before then. It's on the tablet on your nightstand." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Ms. Harrison, why did the previous nurses leave?" She paused at the door. "They were unsuitable. Mr. Blackwood has moods. He tests people. Most fail." With that cryptic statement, she closed the door behind her. Left alone, I explored my new living space, trying to shake off the unease that had been building since my arrival. The windows offered a spectacular view of the forest and mountains beyond, but I noticed they didn't open. In fact, they appeared to be made of some kind of reinforced glass. The tablet contained Alexander Blackwood's medical file, extensive but with strange gaps. Entire sections were redacted, particularly those relating to the accident and initial treatment. The most recent entries showed little improvement in his condition, despite what should have been an aggressive rehabilitation regimen. After unpacking my meager belongings, which looked pitiful, in the spacious closet alongside the provided clothes, I ventured downstairs for dinner. The vast dining room was empty, except for a single-place setting at the enormous table. I ate alone, served by a silent staff member who disappeared as soon as the food was delivered. That night, lying in the most luxurious bed I'd ever slept in, I was startled awake by what sounded like footsteps in the hallway, followed by a muffled conversation. Checking the time, I saw it was just after 2 in the morning. I crept to my door and opened it a crack, catching a glimpse of someone turning the corner at the end of the hall, heading toward the forbidden east wing. It wasn't Miss Harrison or any of the staff I'd seen earlier, but in the dim light I couldn't make out who it was. Back in bed, I struggled to fall asleep again. Despite the comfort of my surroundings, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong in this house. The high salary, the secrecy, the restricted areas, the strange behavior of the staff, it all pointed to something beyond a simple caretaking job. As I finally drifted off, I promised myself I would be on guard. Whatever secrets Blackwood Estate was hiding, I needed to stay focused on my goal: financial independence and a fresh start. I just had to last longer than those other 6 nurses. Little did I know that my very presence in this house was part of a plan set in motion long before I ever heard the name Blackwood, a plan in which I was never meant to succeed. At precisely 9 the next morning, I stood outside Alexander Blackwood's suite, wearing the gray scrubs provided and carrying the tablet with his medical information. After a deep breath, I knocked on the door. "Enter," came a voice from inside, deeper than I had expected. The suite was larger than my own, with the same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest. The space was divided into a sitting area, a bedroom visible through an open door, and what appeared to be a home office. Unlike the rest of the house, this room showed signs of actual habitation: books stacked on tables, a laptop open on a desk, a half-empty glass of water. Alexander Blackwood sat in a wheelchair near the windows, his back to me. All I could see was a head of dark hair slightly longer than in the photos I'd researched, and shoulders that still looked powerful despite his condition. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm Veronica Miller, your new nurse," I said, maintaining the professional tone I used with all my patients. "Nurse number 7, he replied without turning around. "Let's see how long you last." When he finally rotated his wheelchair to face me, I tried not to react to the change in his appearance. The handsome, vital man from the website photos was still visible in his features, but his face was gaunt with deep shadows under his eyes. His complexion was pale from lack of sunlight, and a thin scar ran along his left jawline. His eyes, though, were just as intense as in the photographs, a penetrating blue that seemed to look through me rather than at me. "Before we begin the usual routine, tell me about your qualifications," he said, his voice flat. "And don't bother with the resume version. I've read your file." The statement caught me off guard. "My file, Ms. Miller. I don't hire anyone to work in my home without knowing everything about them," he said with a hint of impatience. your nursing degree from Penn State, your specialization in rehabilitation, your exemplary work at Boston Memorial, your recently canceled wedding. The casual mention of my personal life made my stomach clench, but I kept my expression neutral. Then you know I'm more than qualified to assist with your rehabilitation program. A flicker of something crossed his face, almost like amusement. Qualified, perhaps, but are you stubborn enough? The others weren't. I don't understand. 6 nurses before you all with impressive credentials. All quit because they couldn't handle me or the isolation of this place. What makes you different? I met his gaze directly. I need this job, Mr. Blackwood, and I don't give up easily. He studied me for a long moment, then gestured to a chair across from him. Sit and call me Alex. Mr. Blackwood makes me feel like my father, and that's the last thing I need. As I sat, he continued, Did Harrison show you the medical suite? What do you make of it? It's impressive, I answered honestly. Better equipped than many hospitals. And yet after 2 years, I still can't walk unassisted. Curious, isn't it? There was something challenging in his tone that made me pause. The reports indicate your progress has been slower than expected. With spinal injuries, recovery can be unpredictable. Is that the diplomatic way of saying I should be doing better by now? I chose my words carefully. The records show periods of improvement followed by setbacks. That's not uncommon, but the pattern is unusual. Alex's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Finally, someone who doesn't just parrot back what's in those sanitized reports. He wheeled his chair closer to me. Tell me, Veronica Miller, do you always believe what you read in medical files? Before I could answer, the door opened, and a man in a lab coat entered carrying a medical bag. Dr. Sharma, Alex said, his demeanor instantly changing, becoming more withdrawn. Right on schedule. Dr. Sharma was a middle-aged Indian man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He nodded to me politely. You must be Ms. Miller. I'm glad to meet you. I hope you'll find the position satisfactory. Something in the way he emphasized the last word made me wonder if he was trying to convey a message. The doctor proceeded to examine Alex, checking his vital signs and testing the reflexes and sensation in his legs. I observed carefully, noting that Alex seemed to flinch slightly at certain touches, though the doctor didn't appear to notice. Your medication needs adjustment, Dr. Sharma announced after the examination. I'm increasing the muscle relaxant and adding a new pain management protocol. Alex's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The last adjustment made it harder to focus. Side effects are to be expected, the doctor replied smoothly. Ms. Miller will monitor and report any issues. After writing up his notes and leaving prescriptions, Dr. Sharma asked to speak with me privately in the hallway. Ms. Miller, he said in a low voice once we were outside, Mr. Blackwood is a challenging patient. He can be resistant to treatment. It's important to ensure he takes his medication exactly as prescribed. Of course, I replied, professional but slightly puzzled by his emphasis. The household staff will support you, but ultimately his care is your responsibility. He handed me a business card. My direct number should you have any concerns, day or night. Back inside, I found Alex staring out the window again, his expression distant. Shall we begin your physical therapy session? I suggested. Why bother? He asked without looking at me. Nothing changes. I moved to stand beside his wheelchair. With respect, that attitude guarantees failure. He turned to me, surprise evident on his face. The others would have backed off by now. I'm not the others, I said simply. Now we can start with passive range of motion exercises, or you can continue feeling sorry for yourself. Your choice. For a moment, I thought I'd pushed too far. His eyes flashed with anger, but then something unexpected happened. He laughed. It was a rusty sound, as if long unused. 7 might be my lucky number after all, he he said. "All right, Veronica Miller, let's see what you've got." I worked him hard that first session, assessing his true capabilities rather than just following the protocol in his file. He had more strength in his legs than the reports suggested, and his fine motor control was better than documented. When I pointed this out, he merely shrugged. "Good days and bad days," he said dismissively. After the session, as I was helping him back into the wheelchair, he suddenly gripped my wrist. His hand was stronger than I expected. "Trust no one in this house," he said in a low voice. "Not even me." Before I could respond, he released me and called out, "That will be all for today, Ms. Miller. I find I'm rather tired." As I gathered my things to leave, confused by his cryptic warning, he added in a louder voice, "You'll last a week, maybe 2. They all break eventually." In the hallway outside, I nearly collided with Ms. Harrison, who appeared to have been standing very close to the door. "How was your first session?" she asked, her expression unreadable. "Productive," I replied neutrally. "Mr. Blackwood has more potential for improvement than the records indicate." Something flickered in her eyes. "Don't get your hopes up. The others thought so too in the beginning." As she walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Glancing up, I noticed a small security camera in the corner of the hallway, its red light blinking steadily. In fact, now that I was paying attention, I realized there were cameras throughout the house covering nearly every angle. That evening, I ate dinner alone again, then spent time reviewing Alex's medical records more thoroughly. The inconsistencies bothered me. His medication seemed excessive for his condition, and the pattern of improvement followed by setbacks didn't make clinical sense. As I was making notes, there was a soft knock at my door. Opening it, I found a young man I recognized as one of the ground staff, looking nervous. "Yes?" I asked. "Just a friendly warning," he said quietly, glancing down the hallway. "Always lock your door at night, and stay out of the East Wing." Before I could ask what he meant, he hurried away. That night, I made sure to lock my door before going to bed, but sleep eluded me. Around 1 in the morning, I heard it again, footsteps passing my room, heading toward the East Wing. This time, I was determined to see who it was. Slipping out of bed, I cracked open my door just in time to see a figure turning the corner. I followed at a safe distance, keeping to the shadows. The figure, which I could now tell was a man, approached the keypad-locked doors to the East Wing, quickly entered a code, and disappeared inside. I waited a few minutes, debating whether to return to my room or try to see more. Curiosity won out. I crept toward the East Wing doors, not intending to enter, but hoping to hear something, anything that might explain the strange atmosphere of this house. As I got closer, I noticed a thin strip of light under the door. Pressing my ear against it, I could hear muffled voices, one of them sounding agitated. I couldn't make out words, but something about the second voice sent a chill through me. It sounded familiar, though I couldn't place it. Suddenly, the voices grew louder, approaching the door. I barely had time to duck around a corner before the door opened, spilling light into the hallway. Peering carefully from my hiding place, I froze in shock. Walking out of the East Wing was Miss Harrison, looking agitated. But it was the person behind her that made my blood run cold. Jackson. My ex-fiancé. In this house, thousands of miles from where I'd last seen him. My mind reeled, unable to process what I was seeing. What was Jackson doing here? How could he possibly be connected to Alexander Blackwood or this estate? "She's not suspicious yet," I heard Jackson say. "But we need to move faster. Elise is getting impatient." "Keep your voice down," Ms. Harrison hissed. "The walls have ears. We'll discuss this tomorrow." They moved away down the hall, their voices fading. I remained hidden, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they would hear it. Eventually, I made my way back to my room on shaking legs, locked the door, and sat on the edge of my bed trying to make sense of what I'd just witnessed. Jackson, the man who had betrayed me, left me financially ruined and heartbroken, was somehow involved with the Blackwood household. And who was Elise? The name was familiar, but in my shock, I couldn't place it. One thing was clear: my presence in this house was not a coincidence. I had been brought here deliberately as part of some scheme involving my ex-fiancé. The job offer that had seemed too good to be true was exactly that, a carefully baited trap that I had walked right into. But why? What could they possibly want from me? And how was Alexander Blackwood involved? Was he part of this plot, or was he another victim? As dawn broke, I made a decision. I would stay and uncover the truth. If I had been brought here as part of some plan, I needed to know what it was and who was behind it. Running away would solve nothing and might put me in even more danger. I would continue as if nothing had changed, playing my role as the dedicated nurse, but watching, listening, gathering information. And most importantly, I would find out if Alex was puppet or puppet master in this elaborate deception. The game had changed, but I was determined not to be a pawn in it any longer. The next morning, I arrived at Alex's suite for our scheduled session, my mind racing with questions, but my expression carefully neutral. If he was involved in whatever scheme included Jackson, I couldn't let him know that I'd discovered anything. "You look tired," Alex commented as I entered. "Trouble sleeping in your new surroundings." I wondered if he knew I'd been wandering the halls last night. "Just adjusting," I replied. "How are you feeling today?" "The same as yesterday, the same as the day before, the same as I've felt for 2 years." There was a bitterness in his voice that seemed genuine. During our therapy session, I observed him more carefully than ever, looking for signs of deception. His physical responses seemed authentic, the muscle atrophy in his legs consistent with his reported condition. If he was faking his disability, he was doing an extremely convincing job of it. "You're quiet today," he remarked as I helped him stretch his left leg. Having second thoughts about taking this position, I chose my words carefully. "I'm just trying to understand this place. And you." He gave me a searching look. "What specifically are you trying to understand? For someone with your resources, your progress seems unusually slow. The medication you're on is excessive for your condition. And then there's the secrecy, the restricted areas, the way the staff acts around you. It doesn't add up." I watched his face closely as I spoke, looking for any reaction that might confirm my suspicions. What I saw instead was a flash of something that looked almost like relief. "Finally," he said quietly, "someone who sees it." "Sees what?" He glanced at the security camera in the corner of the room, then gestured for me to come closer. When I leaned in, he whispered, "Not here. They're watching, listening." The intensity in his eyes was unnerving. Either he was telling the truth or he was an exceptional actor. "Who is Elise?" I asked, keeping my voice low. His reaction was immediate and visceral. He flinched as if I'd struck him, his face draining of color. "Where did you hear that name?" "I overheard someone mention it." I didn't dare reveal more. Alex's hand shot out, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "If you value your life, don't say that name again. Not until we can speak privately." The door to the suite opened abruptly, and Ms. Harrison entered without knocking. "Is everything all right, Mr. Blackwood?" The monitoring system showed elevated vital signs. Alex released my arm and leaned back in his wheelchair, his demeanor instantly changing to one of bored indifference. "Ms. Miller was just being overzealous with the physical therapy. Nothing to concern yourself with." Ms. Harrison's gaze shifted between us, suspicious. "Perhaps it would be best to conclude today's session early, Dr. Sharma's new medication protocol begins this afternoon, and you should rest before then." "By all means," Alex said with a dismissive wave. "We wouldn't want to disrupt the doctor's precious schedule." After Ms. Harrison left, Alex spoke in a normal volume, clearly for the benefit of whoever might be monitoring. "Same time tomorrow, Ms. Miller. Try not to be quite so aggressive with the exercises." As I gathered my things to leave, he handed me a book from his nightstand. "Some reading material since you expressed interest in spinal injuries. This author's perspective might be illuminating." I took the book, nodding my understanding. Whatever message he wanted to convey would be inside. Back in my room, I examined the book, a medical text on spinal cord rehabilitation. A small piece of paper had been inserted between the pages. The note, written in a shaky hand, read, "Medication tampered with. Keep me lucid. East Wing after midnight. Trust no one." The message confirmed my suspicions that something sinister was happening in this house, but raised even more questions. If Alex was being drugged, who was responsible? Ms. Harrison, Dr. Sharma. And how did Jackson and the mysterious Elise fit into this? That afternoon, I observed, as Dr. Sharma's new medication protocol was administered by Ms. Harrison. The dosage seemed excessive, especially the muscle relaxants and pain medication, which would significantly impair cognitive function. "I'll take over medication management from now on," I informed Ms. Harrison. "It's part of my responsibilities as his nurse." She frowned. "That won't be necessary. I've been handling Mr. Blackwood's medication since his accident." "With all due respect," I insisted, "I'm the medical professional here, and proper protocol dictates that I should oversee all aspects of his treatment." We locked eyes in a silent battle of wills. Finally, she relented. "Very well. I'll have the medication delivered to you each morning, but be aware Mr. Blackwood can be difficult about taking it. That's why I've been handling it." "I'm sure I can manage," I replied, maintaining a professional tone despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. After she left, I checked on Alex. The medication was already taking effect. His speech was slurred, his movements sluggish. I felt a surge of anger at what was being done to him, regardless of who he was or what connection he might have to Jackson. "Just rest," I told him, adjusting his pillows. "I'll be back to check on you later." His eyes, cloudy with drugs, tried to focus on my face. "Remember," he mumbled, "midnight." For the rest of the day, I went about my duties, normally trying not to arouse suspicion. I took dinner in my room, claiming fatigue, but really wanting to prepare for my midnight meeting with Alex. As the hour approached, I changed into dark clothes and waited, listening for any movement in the hallway. At precisely midnight, I slipped out of my room and made my way cautiously toward the east wing. Before I reached the forbidden doors, a hand closed over my mouth from behind. I struggled until a familiar voice whispered in my ear, "It's me. Follow and stay quiet." Alex released me, and I turned to see him standing unassisted, though leaning heavily on a cane. The sight shocked me. According to his medical file, he shouldn't have been able to stand at all, let alone walk. He led me through a service corridor I hadn't noticed before, moving slowly but with determination. We eventually reached what appeared to be a forgotten part of the house, a small sitting room thick with dust. "No cameras here," he said, sinking into a chair with obvious relief. "They think this section of the house has been sealed off. We don't have much time." "You can walk," I stated the obvious, still processing what I was seeing. "Barely, and not for long," he replied. "The drugs keep me weak, but I've been secretly working on regaining my strength whenever I can stay lucid enough." "Who is doing this to you? And what does it have to do with me?" Alex's face hardened. "Elise, my wife." "Your wife. But she died in the accident." "That's what everyone was told. That's what I believed until 6 months ago when I saw her on one of the security feeds. She's very much alive, and she's been controlling this estate, my company, my life, while keeping me drugged and isolated." My head was spinning. "But why? Money, power, revenge," he said bitterly. "Our marriage was falling apart before the accident. She wanted control of the company, but my shares can't transfer to her unless I'm dead or declared mentally incompetent. The accident was supposed to kill me, but I survived. So she created this prison, instead keeping me medicated to the point where I can barely function while she runs everything from behind the scenes. And the restricted East Wing, her command center, she lives there monitoring everything, pulling strings like a puppet master. Ms. Harrison works for her, so does Dr. Sharma. The security staff, the household employees, they're all her people. I tried to process this information. But what about Jackson? My ex-fiancé. I saw him here last night talking to Ms. Harrison about someone named Elise. Alex's expression darkened. So, that's how they found you. I wondered why they chose you specifically as the new nurse. He leaned forward. Veronica, you weren't hired despite your connection to this Jackson person. You were hired because of it. I don't understand. Why would Elise want me here? To torture me, he said simply. Each nurse has been specifically chosen to cause me psychological distress. The first was the spitting image of Elise's sister, whom I once dated. The second reminded me of my mother. Each one represents someone from my past, someone connected to a painful memory or relationship. A cold realization washed over me. And I remind you of someone too. He nodded grimly. My first love from college. She even found a nurse with the same name. It's part of her psychological warfare surrounding me with ghosts from my past while keeping me too drugged to fight back. That's insane, I whispered. How could she possibly have known about Jackson, about what happened to me? Elise has resources connections. Once she identified you as a potential candidate based on your resemblance and name, she would have investigated your background thoroughly. Finding a vulnerable point like a failed relationship would be perfect for her purposes. A horrible thought struck me. Are you saying she orchestrated my breakup with Jackson? That she paid him to leave me? The pity in Alex's eyes gave me my answer before he spoke. It's exactly what she would do. Create a situation where you'd be financially and emotionally desperate, then offer this job as a lifeline. You were set up to be another instrument of my torture. The room seemed to spin around me as pieces fell into place. Jackson's sudden betrayal after 5 years together, the convenient timing of this job offer, the way Mr. Winters had known about my recent change in circumstances. Why are you telling me this? I asked, struggling to maintain my composure. Why trust me when I was brought here as part of her plan? Because you saw through it faster than the others, he replied. Because you questioned the medication, the security, the inconsistencies. And because I'm running out of time. Elise is planning something. I've overheard fragments, mentions of a final phase. I think she's going to have me declared incompetent, soon take control of everything legally. What can we do? First, we need proof of what she's doing, evidence of the drugging, the conspiracy. Then we need to get it to someone outside who can help. Who? My former business partner, David Chen. He never believed the official story about the accident. He's been trying to reach me for months, but Elise intercepts all communications. I took a deep breath, trying to think clearly despite the shock of everything I'd learned. The medication is key. If I can get samples prove it's being tampered with... You'll have to be careful, Alex warned. If Elise or her people suspect you know anything, you'll disappear like the last nurse who got too close to the truth. What happened to her? Alex's eyes darkened. Official story is she quit, suddenly returned to her hometown, but her personal items were left behind, even her phone. No one has heard from her since. A chill ran down my spine. How do I know you're telling the truth? This could all be an elaborate manipulation. You don't, he admitted. You have to decide who to believe, me or them. But ask yourself this. Why would I be pretending to be more disabled than I am? What would I gain from that deception? It was a valid point. If Alex wanted to manipulate me, appearing stronger would be more advantageous than feigning weakness. We should get back before they notice we're gone, he said, struggling to his feet. Remember to act normally tomorrow. Give me the regular dose of medication where they can see, but switch it when possible. I need to stay lucid if we're going to find a way out of this. As we made our way back through the service corridor, I tried to process everything I'd learned. If Alex was telling the truth, I had been brought to this house as a pawn in a sadistic game, my life deliberately shattered to make me vulnerable. The thought made me sick with anger. But if he was lying, if this was some elaborate deception, for what purpose? What would he gain by turning me against Elise and the staff? Back at my room, I locked the door and sat on the edge of my bed, the same position I'd been in the night before after seeing Jackson. Everything had changed yet again. The job I'd taken out of desperation was something far darker than I could have imagined. As I finally lay down to sleep, one thought kept circling in my mind. I needed to find out if Jackson was really being paid to ruin my life. Because if that were true, if my pain had been manufactured as part of Elise's twisted game, there would be no place on earth she could hide from my wrath. The next morning, I entered Alex's suite with the new perspective our midnight conversation had given me. I observed the security cameras more carefully, noting their placement and angles. I administered his medication as required, but palmed the most powerful sedatives when I could do so unobserved, replacing them with harmless alternatives I'd found in the medical supply cabinet. "How are you feeling today?" I asked for the benefit of anyone monitoring. "The usual fog," Alex replied, his eyes communicating a different message. "Thank you." Throughout the day, I maintained the appearance of normalcy while gathering information. I noted the staff routines, the timing of security patrols, the moments when monitoring might be less vigilant. I paid careful attention to Ms. Harrison's comings and goings, particularly her visits to the East Wing. In the afternoon, I deliberately left my tablet in the therapy room and returned to retrieve it, hoping to catch a glimpse of Alex without the performance he put on for others. I found him standing by the window, supporting himself on furniture, but definitely upright, confirming his story about secretly building strength. He quickly sat down when he heard me enter, but not before I'd seen the evidence with my own eyes. "Forgot my tablet," I said casually, retrieving it from where I'd left it. "Ms. Miller," he called as I turned to leave. "I've been thinking about trying hydrotherapy. The pool in the lower level might be beneficial." I understood the hidden message. The pool would be another place to talk privately, possibly without surveillance. "I'll look into scheduling that," I replied. "It could be very helpful for your condition." Later, reviewing his medical file again, I noticed something I'd missed before. The accident report mentioned a passenger who had supposedly died at the scene, but the name had been redacted. Elise, presumably. But there was a small note in the margin, barely legible, "No body recovered." That evening, I decided to take a calculated risk. If I was going to find concrete evidence of what was happening in this house, I needed to investigate the East Wing more thoroughly. I knew the code to enter now, having watched Ms. Harrison's fingers when she entered it the previous night, 2-5-8-1-9. I waited until after midnight when the house was quiet. Instead of meeting Alex as planned, I left him a note hidden in his bathroom cabinet where cameras wouldn't see, explaining that I was going to search the East Wing. The forbidden doors opened silently with the code. Inside was a corridor much like the rest of the house, but with signs of regular use, no dust, fresh flowers in a vase, a jacket hanging on a hook. I moved cautiously, aware that this section might have its own security measures. The first room I found appeared to be a monitoring station. Banks of screens showed different areas of the estate, including Alex's suite where he slept fitfully, my own empty room, in the exterior grounds. A logbook on the desk contained notes about my activities since arrival, confirming I was being closely watched. The next room was a sophisticated office with multiple computers and filing cabinets. Here I found the first concrete evidence, a folder labeled Nurse Recruitment, containing profiles of all the previous nurses, including mine. Each profile noted physical characteristics that matched someone from Alex's past, along with psychological assessments and vulnerability factors. My own file was the most disturbing. It contained photographs of me with Jackson from months before, detailed financial records showing my precarious situation after he left, even transcripts of phone conversations with Mia where I discussed my desperation. Most damning of all was a contract with Jackson's signature agreeing to end our relationship in exchange for a substantial payment and forgiveness of gambling debts I hadn't known existed. The clinical language described the optimal timing of his departure to ensure maximum emotional impact, guaranteeing I would be receptive to the job offer when it came. My hands shook as I photographed the documents with my phone. The level of calculation, the cold-blooded manipulation of my life, it was almost too much to comprehend. 5 years of what I thought was love had been bought and paid for my pain, meticulously planned by a woman I'd never met. As I replaced the file and moved deeper into the wing, I heard voices approaching. I quickly ducked into a small closet, leaving the door cracked to see who was coming. Jackson and Miss Harrison entered the office, continuing what seemed to be an ongoing argument. "I've done everything asked of me," Jackson was saying, his voice agitated. "I've been stuck in this place for months. When do I get the rest of my money?" "When Elise is satisfied, the plan is complete," Ms. Harrison replied coolly. "Your ex-fiancé is proving more resilient than the others. Elise wants to ensure she serves her purpose before concluding this phase." "And what purpose is that exactly?" "You've never been clear about why you wanted Veronica specifically." Ms. Harrison's smile was chilling. "Let's just say Mr. Blackwood has a weakness for earnest, dedicated women with a nurturing streak. Veronica's physical resemblance to someone from his past is simply a bonus. The real value is in breaking her spirit where he can see it happen. It's so much more satisfying than the physical pain of the accident." My blood ran cold at the casual cruelty in her voice. "Look, I did what you paid me to do," Jackson continued. "I left her. I took her money, I made sure she was desperate, but keeping me here, making me hide every time she might see me, that wasn't part of the deal." "Plans change," Ms. Harrison said dismissively. "Elise arrives tomorrow to oversee the final phase personally. After that, you'll receive your payment and be free to go." "And Veronica? What happens to her when this final phase is complete?" Ms. Harrison's expression hardened. "That's not your concern. You gave up any right to worry about her welfare when you accepted our first payment." They moved away, their voices fading. I remained hidden, processing what I'd heard. Elise was arriving tomorrow. The final phase was imminent. Whatever was planned, it was happening soon. I waited until I was certain they were gone, then continued my exploration. At the end of the corridor was what appeared to be a private apartment, luxuriously appointed, but with a sterile quality, as if the occupant was rarely present. On the bedside table was a framed photograph that made me gasp. It showed Alex with a stunning blonde woman, their arms around each other, smiling at the camera. But the woman's face had been methodically scratched out, with something sharp gouging the image repeatedly in what could only be described as a rage. I now had evidence of the conspiracy against both Alex and myself, but I still didn't understand the full scope of Elise's plan or what this final phase entailed. I needed to warn Alex and figure out our next move before Elise arrived. As I carefully made my way back toward the exit, a floorboard creaked beneath my foot. I froze, listening intently for any reaction. When none came, I continued more cautiously. I had almost reached the doors when they suddenly opened, revealing Jackson standing there, his expression changing from surprise to alarm as he recognized me. "Veronica, what are you doing here?" For a moment, we stared at each other, the man I had once planned to marry and the woman whose heart he had broken for money. In his eyes, I saw a flicker of something that might have been regret. "I know everything," I said quietly. "I know you were paid to leave me. I know this whole thing was a setup." He glanced nervously over his shoulder. "You shouldn't be here. If they find you—" "Why did you do it, Jackson? 5 years together, and you sold me out to these people for what money?" His face hardened. "You wouldn't understand. The debts, the pressure I was under. They offered a way out." "At my expense," I said bitterly. "You destroyed me for a paycheck." I didn't know what they were planning for you, he insisted, though his eyes wouldn't meet mine. They just said they needed you to take this job. They didn't explain why. And you didn't ask, because you didn't care what happened to me as long as you got paid. A noise from further down the corridor made us both tense. You need to go, Jackson hissed. Now, before someone comes. I pushed past him, heading for my room, my mind racing with everything I'd discovered. I needed to get the evidence to Alex, find a way to contact his former partner, and escape this house before Elise arrived, and whatever final phase she had planned began. Back in my room, I hid my phone with the photographic evidence under the mattress and tried to formulate a plan. Direct escape seemed impossible with the security measures in place. Communication with the outside world was restricted. My phone had no signal except for the estate's internal network. The best option seemed to be getting Alex mobile enough to escape with me. Together, we might find a way past the security perimeter. But first, I needed to speak with him. Share what I'd learned and find out more about this David Chen person who might help us. As dawn broke, I made a decision. Today, I would suggest the hydrotherapy session Alex had mentioned create an opportunity for us to talk privately and begin implementing our escape plan. With Elise arriving, there was no time to waste. What I didn't know then was that Elise was already in the house, and the final phase of her plan had begun the moment I set foot in the East Wing. The next morning, everything seemed eerily normal. Ms. Harrison delivered Alex's medication with her usual clinical detachment, showing no sign that she knew about my nocturnal exploration of the East Wing. I'll be taking Mr. Blackwood to the hydrotherapy pool this afternoon, I informed her. The doctor's notes recommend water exercises for his condition. She frowned slightly. That facility hasn't been used in some time. I'll need to have maintenance check it first. No need, I replied smoothly. I inspected it yesterday, and it's in perfect working order. The warm water will be beneficial for his muscle tone. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, but she nodded. Very well. I'll inform security of the schedule change. In Alex's suite, I administered his medication as usual, but swapped the powerful sedatives for harmless substitutes. We maintained our usual roles for the benefit of the cameras, but I could see the question in his eyes. We'll try the pool therapy at 2 o'clock, I said. The water should help with mobility. He nodded, understanding the subtext. Looking forward to it. The morning passed with agonizing slowness. I went about my duties, hyper-aware of every camera, every staff member who might be reporting my movements. The knowledge that Elise was somewhere in the house, perhaps watching me at this very moment, made my skin crawl. At 2 o'clock, I helped Alex into a wheelchair and took him to the elevator that led to the lower level. The pool area was luxurious, with a large heated pool changing rooms and a jacuzzi. Most importantly, the acoustics of the space made it difficult for concealed microphones to pick up conversations in the water, and the steam from the heated pool would obscure camera views. I helped Alex change into swim trunks in one of the cabanas, noting that his legs, while atrophied from disuse, still had more muscle mass than his medical condition would suggest. He was indeed secretly working to regain his strength. Once in the water, supported by flotation devices, we could speak more freely. I found evidence, I told him quietly, pretending to assist him with arm exercises. Documents confirming everything you told me. Elise is alive. She's been orchestrating this whole situation, including hiring me to torment you. Relief washed over his face. I was starting to think I was losing my mind, that maybe the drugs were causing paranoid delusions. It's all real, I confirmed, and worse than you know. Jackson, my ex-fiancé, was paid to leave me to create the perfect conditions for me to accept this job. They've been manipulating my life for months. Alex's expression darkened with anger. That's Elise's signature. She doesn't just want to control me, she wants to destroy everything and everyone around me. She's here in the house. Jackson and Ms. Harrison were discussing a final phase that begins today. His body tensed. We need to move immediately. Whatever she's planning, it won't be good for either of us. I nodded. I thought about trying to escape, but the security here is too tight. Our best bet is to get evidence to your partner, David Chen. Can you tell me how to reach him? His private number is memorized. I never trusted electronic contact information for good reason, but we need a phone that works outside the estate's network. Mine doesn't, I admitted. All outside calls are blocked. Alex thought for a moment. There's a landline in my father's old study connected directly to an outside line. It was installed years ago, and I don't think Elise knows about it. The room has been sealed since his death, but I know how to access it. Hope flickered to life. Where is it? Third floor, north wing, behind a bookcase in what's now listed as a storage room. My father was paranoid about business rivals spying on him, so he had a secure line installed that bypassed the main house system. We formulated a plan. After dinner, I would create a diversion that would draw security attention, allowing Alex to make his way to the study using the service corridors. I would meet him there with the evidence I'd gathered, and we would contact David Chen together. But first, we needed to continue the charade of normal therapy to avoid raising suspicions. After the pool session, I helped Alex back to his suite, maintaining our professional demeanor for the cameras. As I was leaving, Ms. Harrison approached. Ms. Miller, Elise would like to meet with you this evening after dinner, 7 o'clock in the main study. My heart stuttered, but I kept my expression neutral. Elise, I thought Mr. Blackwood's wife passed away. Ms. Harrison's smile didn't reach her eyes. A common misconception. Elise Blackwood is very much alive and is the true owner of this estate. She's been away on business but has returned to check on her husband's progress. So, they were abandoning the pretense. This couldn't be good. Of course, I replied. I'll be there at 7. This changed everything. Our plan to access the secure phone would have to happen before my meeting with Elise. If she was revealing herself openly, the final phase must be imminent. I quickly wrote a note to Alex and slipped it to him during his evening medication, alerting him to the change in plans. We would need to act immediately after I left his suite. At 6:30, I finished administering Alex's evening medication, making sure to swap out the sedatives. Try to rest now, I said for the benefit of the cameras. I'll check on you later. He nodded, giving a convincing performance of a man settling in for a drugged sleep. But as soon as I closed the door, I knew he would be preparing for our escape attempt. Instead of heading to my meeting with Elise, I went to my room and retrieved my phone with the evidence, then made my way toward the third-floor study Alex had described. I took a circuitous route to avoid security cameras using service stairs and maintenance corridors. The storage room was exactly where Alex had said it would be. Inside, dusty furniture was draped with sheets, giving the room a ghostly appearance. The bookcase Alex had mentioned was against the far wall, filled with old volumes no one had touched in years. I found the hidden latch behind a copy of War and Peace and pulled it. The bookcase swung open with a soft click, revealing a small office beyond perfectly preserved from decades earlier. Inside, sitting at the antique desk, was not Alex, but a striking blonde woman whose face I recognized from the photograph in the East Wing apartment, the one with the scratched-out visage. Elise Blackwood, very much alive and smiling like a cat that had cornered a mouse. "Veronica," she said pleasantly, "I'm so glad you could join me. I believe we have a lot to discuss." Before I could react, 2 security guards stepped out from behind the door, blocking my escape. I was trapped. "Where is Alex?" I demanded. Elise's smile widened. "My husband is exactly where he should be, heavily sedated in his room." "Did you really think we wouldn't notice you tampering with his medication, that we wouldn't be monitoring your little midnight conversations?" My blood ran cold. They had known everything all along. "Please sit," she continued, gesturing to a chair across from her. "It's time you understood your role in all this." With no alternative, I sat mind racing for a way out of this situation. "You've performed better than expected," Elise said, studying me with clinical interest. "The others broke so much sooner. Something about you resonated with Alex, made him fight harder. It's been fascinating to watch. Why? I asked, unable to keep the disgust from my voice. Why do this to him? To me? Alex took everything from me, she replied, her pleasant mask slipping to reveal the rage beneath. He was going to divorce me, leave me with nothing, while he kept control of the empire we built together. So I decided if I couldn't have the company through marriage, I'd take it another way. By trying to kill him in that car accident. She shrugged, unperturbed by my accusation. Plans don't always work out as intended. When he survived, I had to improvise. Keeping him isolated, medicated, making him question his own sanity while I ran things from behind the scenes, it was a better revenge anyway. Slower, more satisfying. And the nurses' women who reminded him of people from his past. Psychological torture, she said casually. Each one represented someone he cared about, and each one I made sure would abandon him just as he tried to abandon me. Some needed more persuasion than others to leave. The implication that the previous nurses might have been harmed sent a chill down my spine. And now the final phase, I said, remembering Jackson and Ms. Harrison's conversation. What is it having me killed to torment him further? Elise laughed, the sound devoid of humor. Nothing so melodramatic. The final phase is simply having Alex declared mentally incompetent. The documentation has been prepared for months, recording his deteriorating mental state, his paranoid delusions about me being alive and conspiring against him. She leaned forward. And you, Veronica, will be the final witness. The dedicated nurse who tried everything to help him but ultimately had to concede that his grip on reality was gone. Your signature on those papers will complete my takeover of Blackwood Technologies. I won't do it, I said firmly. I won't help you destroy him. I thought you might say that. Elise opened a drawer and removed a file. That's why I've prepared alternatives. Option 1, you sign the papers, receive a generous severance package, and walk away. Option 2, these photos of you breaking into restricted areas of the house, stealing medication, and conspiring with a mentally unstable patient are sent to the medical licensing board, ending your career. Your choice. She opened the file to reveal photographs of me in the East Wing taking Alex's medication, even our midnight meeting. They had been watching everything all along. As I stared at the evidence against me, the door suddenly burst open. Alex stood there, leaning heavily on a cane, but very much awake and alert. Behind him was Dr. Sharma, looking nervous but determined. Option 3, Alex said, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. The truth comes out and you go to prison, Elise. Elise's composure cracked. How are you even standing the medication? Has been adjusted for some time, Dr. Sharma interjected, stepping forward. I've been working with Mr. Blackwood secretly for months, gradually reducing the sedatives while making it appear his dosage remained the same. The security guards looked uncertain, unsure whose orders to follow. Alex addressed them directly. The police are already on their way. David Chen contacted them an hour ago with evidence of what's been happening here. If you help her now, you'll be accessories to kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted murder. One guard immediately stepped away from Elise. The other hesitated only briefly before following suit. Elise's face contorted with rage. You're lying. There's no way you contacted anyone. The house is completely isolated. Not the old secure line in my father's study, Alex replied. The one you're sitting next to right now that connects directly to the outside world, bypassing all your security systems. The same line David has been monitoring for exactly this moment. I watched in astonishment as the realization of defeat washed over Elise's face, quickly replaced by cold fury. With a sudden movement, she lunged across the desk, grabbing for something in the drawer. Alex reacted faster than I would have thought possible, swinging his cane to knock her hand away. Whatever she had been reaching for clattered to the floor. Dr. Sharma rushed forward to restrain her, aided by the security guards who had clearly decided which side to take. "It's over, Elise," Alex said quietly. "The police will be here soon." David has copies of everything: the drugging, the false medical reports, the conspiracy. There's no way out this time. As if on cue, distant sirens could be heard approaching the estate. The next few hours passed in a blur. Police swarmed the mansion, taking statements, collecting evidence, arresting Elise and several staff members, including Ms. Harrison. Jackson was also taken into custody, looking shell-shocked as he was led away in handcuffs. Alex, finally free from the drugs that had kept him weak and confused, explained everything to the authorities. The car accident that had been orchestrated by Elise, her elaborately faked death, the plan to have him declared incompetent while she controlled the company through proxy board members. As dawn broke, we sat together in the kitchen, drinking coffee, the adrenaline of the night slowly wearing off. "I can never repay what you've done," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. "You risked everything to help a stranger." "Not entirely a stranger anymore," I replied, "and I had my own reasons for wanting the truth exposed." He nodded in understanding. "Jackson's betrayal. Finding out it was orchestrated doesn't make it hurt less," I admitted. "But at least now I know it wasn't real, that our entire relationship wasn't just a lie he told for 5 years." "Small comfort," Alex said, "but maybe this will help more." He slid a document across the table to me. "David brought this when he came with the police. It's a new position at the Blackwood Foundation, heading up a rehabilitation program for trauma survivors. The salary is comparable to what you were offered here, but without the hidden agenda, if you're interested." I stared at the offer, overwhelmed by the gesture. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it," he replied. "Not because you need a job or because you feel obligated, but because you're extraordinary at what you do. I've seen it firsthand." And in that moment, looking at this man who had endured 2 years of psychological torture yet emerged with his humanity intact, I felt something shift inside me. The betrayal and heartbreak that had defined my recent past suddenly seemed less overwhelming, less defining. "I'll consider it," I said, and for the first time in months I smiled without reservation. 6 months later, I stood at the podium in the newly renovated Blackwood Rehabilitation Center, addressing the first class of trauma survivors accepted into our program. The journey from that night at the mansion to this moment had been challenging but transformative. Elise was awaiting trial on multiple charges, her elaborate scheme exposed to public scrutiny. Jackson had accepted a plea deal in exchange for testifying against her, and I had found a certain peace in knowing that justice would be served. The Blackwood Foundation, with Alex back at the helm, had established this center to help people who had experienced psychological and physical trauma, providing them with the tools to rebuild their lives. As the director of the program, I had channeled my own experience into creating a healing space for others. My grandmother now lived nearby in a comfortable apartment provided by the foundation, her pride in my accomplishments a constant source of strength. Mia had joined the center's staff as a counselor, our friendship stronger than ever after everything we'd been through. Alex and I had developed a relationship built on mutual respect and shared experience. We had both been broken by betrayal, and in helping each other heal, we had found something unexpected: hope. The wedding dress that had hung in my closet as a painful reminder of what I'd lost had been donated to a charity that helps survivors of domestic abuse start new lives. My old apartment building now seemed like a relic from someone else's life when I drove past it. Jackson had tried to contact me once more after his plea deal, claiming he wanted to apologize to explain. I had declined the meeting. Some chapters needed to remain closed. As I concluded my speech to the program participants, I shared the most important lesson I had learned from my ordeal. We often can't control the betrayals that come into our lives, but we can control how we respond to them. The strength you find in rebuilding yourself can become the foundation that supports others on their own healing journeys. After the ceremony, Alex joined me on the center's terrace overlooking the gardens. "You were magnificent," he said, no longer needing a cane to walk, though he still moved carefully. "They're lucky to have you guiding them." "I'm the lucky one," I replied. "Not many people get a second chance to rebuild their lives with such support." And he took my hand, a gesture that had become comfortable between us. "I was thinking we could expand the program next year, maybe add a wing specifically for people recovering from relationship betrayal." "I'd like that," I said, squeezing his hand. "Turn the pain into purpose." We stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The mansion that had once been my prison was now visible in the distance, transformed into administrative offices for the foundation. "Veronica," Alex said quietly, "I know we agreed to take things slowly, but I want you to know that whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here. No pressure, no expectations." I turned to face him, this man who had seen me at my most vulnerable and most determined, who had fought alongside me when all seemed lost. "I think I'm getting there," I replied honestly. "Not quite yet, but soon." His smile was understanding. "I have all the time in the world." And later that evening, as I deleted the last photographs of Jackson from my phone, I realized that the pain that had once seemed unbearable had transformed into something else. Strength, wisdom, resilience. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had ultimately led me to where I needed to be. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that eventually led you somewhere better? Did something painful ever turn out to be a blessing in disguise? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that. Sometimes our worst moments can lead to our greatest transformations. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, the story doesn't end with betrayal, it's just the difficult middle of a much longer, more beautiful narrative.